Hi, I'm Katie Kaplan, and I'm here with Nick Kuiper, and we're chatting about mental illness and how it can affect you as a child, if what you're aware of and what you aren't aware of. As I've told you, I'm going around Iowa on my Putting the Pieces Together Rural Tour 2020 in my new RV, thank you very much, with my good friend Nick here, and not traveling together, but he's here enjoying it with me. To just bring more awareness and understand the resources that we have available for you living in rural areas. And Nick's going to share a little bit about his story and how he's evolved. So, Nick.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, evolved. I have evolved, but I'm still evolving. But you know, if I had to go back, I was born in Iowa, born in Northwest Iowa, and had what I thought was a decent childhood.
Yeah.
At first, it seemed normal, but as I got older, there were parts of it that became clear were abnormal.
Abnormal in what way?
Lots of family members with addiction, and a couple of family members with some mental health issues as well regarding depression, bipolar illness, and a grandmother, and well, I guess that's it. Mostly depression and that.
And being a young person, even thinking that's the norm.
Yes, and you know, as I traced it back, lots of alcohol addiction in my family, just all the way up to. Honestly, I couldn't find, doing a family tree, I couldn't really find anybody above me in the family tree that didn't have an alcohol problem at some point.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until I got much older, but that was...
And interesting that that's sometimes the norm of, and we just think, well, just like my daughter thought hearing people in her head is a schizophrenic. Everybody must have that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think as a child, I'm thinking about when I'm like 7 or 8, 9. That's kind of when, I just felt like things weren't quite exactly normal for me. But I didn't know what that was, and I think looking back, I tried to protect that a lot by, 1, staying quiet, and 2, just trying to be a good kid and do what I was supposed to be doing, I guess. And so I tried to, excel.
And that quiet issue that you speak of is what we all find as even family members, is that you become more quiet about aspects that are occurring in your life because of the frenetic chaos that's occurring. And that just kind of seeps in and continues. That's a really valid factor.
And I had close friends, but their situation, to me seemed quite a bit better and more stable, their family situation, and so I think I shied away from even in my own, even telling myself that mine was off. I kind of convinced myself that I was normal, or blocked it out and prevented anybody from really knowing, I think. But my parents divorced when I was 9. I had an older brother who's a half brother and a younger brother who we share the same father as well. The time around the divorce was chaotic, but almost necessary. It meant my parents didn't fight anymore. There was no more physical abuse amongst them, and maybe some of the fighting and emotional trauma we had with them being married was an end. So on that hand, it was a very happy time.
Did you have to take a step back? Was it all trained to have it be quiet and not have that
Yeah.
activity and abuse or physical?
Yeah, I think it was strange. It was strange in that standpoint, although I think things continued to be rather chaotic, at least on one end of the family. And so both my parents went back to school and got an education, but mom kind of serial dated some people that didn't treat her very nice still. And so I think the chaos kind of continued on that side and became, you know, the norm. Very normal. Dad's side got quite a bit calmer as he quit drinking and remained sober.
And how old was he when that happened?
Let's see, it'll take me just a minute, but I'll come up with it. He was right around age 40. So,
How old were you?
and I was 10.
And you saw him at that
I think
time?
he was 38.
Yeah. And you still saw him at that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
On a regular basis, not near as much, but
Yeah.
you know, every other weekend for sure. For a few years, and then a bit more because we kind of moved back. We moved back to my hometown, and so both my parents were in the same town. So I saw them both quite a bit in high school.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was very scared of drinking, number one, and so I kind of made the decision not to drink.
In high school?
Until
College?
I was much older. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was even. I mean, I was 21 before I maybe had a drink or two. You know, some sips of a drink or two before that, but never anything to speak of until after I was 21. I think just from what I had grown up with, I was pretty scared of it at that time. However, after that, I quickly became unscared of it. But I was pretty successful in high school with grades, and I was a popular kid, not the most popular, but pretty popular. And then I went to undergrad, and I wanted to go into medicine, and so, you know, I poured my heart into studies, and you know, I did play on the golf team, but I mostly studied, and so
And drinking wasn't a part of that time in your life?
not in undergrad. No, I was in the library on Friday night and Saturday morning. So I hadn't quite. So I was, but I think, you know, I was very good. I learned how to compartmentalize, which I think people in my situation and situations similar do, and so I was able to, you know, forget. I could just put away whatever had got me there. It didn't really matter. I mean, I was there for 4 years to study,
Right.
and you know, I was going to go on and be this successful person, and that's what I was going to do. And so, so I did that and did it really well.
And then at that time, it just feels like I have got it all together. There's nothing behind me. I'm gonna, you know,
Yep.
nothing's affected me.
Yep.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. And I still felt that way for a while. I got into medical school, and then got married a year later to my first wife. I continued to study all the time, and I think I was, you know, I got married. It was sort of part of my plan. Like, I developed this ideal, perfect plan from a young age of what it might look like. So you go to school, you get married, and you know, you get this successful job. And I just kind of ticked them off along the way, without giving them probably the weight they deserve. If I had to think about it now, I mean, I think it's a more important situation than, you know, I wasn't sure who I was yet, so I'm not shocked that I wasn't super successful
Yeah.
in that marriage.
At that time, did you feel anything different, because we haven't spoken of a diagnosis,
Right.
but did you feel anything different about, you know, your behaviors or anything, or did anybody ever bring anything up to you at that time?
So I think from high school, college, and med school, all as I can really tell you is that I felt like I maybe wasn't quite right, and I don't know if that's because I didn't think I was quite good enough, or if I didn't think I belonged, or if I actually sensed something was off. But I remember thinking that.
And those are three really valid aspects to consider. You know, we all go through that stage of, maybe we all don't, but I have done that as well. And with my children, I know they've experienced it. You know, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't keep up with the girls, or I'm not smart enough, or, you know, it's something just said I just didn't belong.
Yeah, and I had plenty of people to tell me how great I was, but that never, that didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it was an internal thing, and I remember feeling that way as a child, but that would have been the persistent theme that kind of carried into my adulthood before major issues started showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I would say so I successfully completed med school. I got into a general surgery residency that I wanted to get into.
Was that overwhelming at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it consumed my life. I mean, I had stopped, part of it I used, I think it consumes your life, but then I think you can also let it completely consume your life, which
Yeah.
I think I did. I mean, I was so focused on doing that I let a lot of other things go, like taking care of myself, really, or
Yeah.
Even being in check. I don't know if I learned how to do that until really this past year.
Mm-hmm. But in terms, sometimes, as a sibling of a schizophrenic daughter, her sibling just kind of became quiet and sat to the background,
Mhm.
and didn't participate very much. She did what she loved to do, which was draw and be kind of creative, but she just kind of let the world go by and focus just in that one area. Is that
Mhm.
what you're speaking of?
Yeah, I think it was part of my compartmentalizing. I mean,
Mhm.
I used it as sort of a reason to not go home over the holidays, to not kind of associate with chaos
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of remember from childhood, and instead I was busy because I was being this successful doctor and
Mm-hmm.
working really hard. So it was a good excuse rather than saying I really don't want to come home.
And were you the first in your family to be a doctor?
Yes.
Wow, that's a big one. That's
Yeah.
a lot of weight to carry.
Mm-hmm. And I always kind of felt guilty about not being around more. At the same token, when I was back in some of that chaotic environment, there was a lot of triggers for me.
What can you name some of them, and so we could share?
Yeah, I think really just there's a lot of volatility in moods. There's a lot of depressed moods back home, and so a lot of that is really bring me down. They drank a lot, which was a huge trigger for me, particularly later on. Once I kind of recognized that, it was a trigger for me to drink, which I started to do really well in residency, and then.
You mean pretty consistently, like regularly?
Yeah,
really well.
I learned it really quickly. Just because I didn't start at a young age doesn't mean I didn't know how.
Just like that, yeah.
So it was.
I would think it'd be really hard not to let that be a part of your life when you've just grown up that way and you've got it in your genes.
Yeah, it was.
Alcoholism and all.
At first it was fine, but but it quickly, after 5 or 6 years, it quickly got progressive.
Yeah.
And I'm, and that's, I think part of that is when I started to be depressed too, and that would have been, so from the ages of 25 to 30.
That's really the time you were finishing school and starting a career.
I was in residency probably during most of that time and starting a career at 30. And so, being depressed.
Did you make yourself or your doctor aware of it, or
No.
how did you handle that?
At that point, I didn't. I wasn't really that willing to get. I don't even know if I recognized it at the time. I think that's probably the. If I think back now, I know that I was, but I don't. At that time, I didn't really think that I was depressed, or certainly didn't think I was bad enough to have to talk to somebody about it.
So you weren't somebody who went to bed and couldn't get out of your bed. You could still function, but there was depression?
At that time, yes.
Yeah.
It got worse later on.
Yeah.
I remember, so just to kind of connect the story, I completed residency, went to a small town and was a general surgeon for 8 years. That's where things really, started to kind of blow up for me. I had started to have, looking back, it's pretty cyclical. I had a couple of times I can remember where I was very depressed, and it was hard to put one foot in front of the other, or shaving seemed like a task.
Wow.
And that would last a while, and by this time I started to reach out to a mental health professional that I started to see for quite a while. We started to kind of try to get to the bottom of some of it.
And what age were you?
This would have been 35.
And that was on your own that you seeked help.
True.
I'm going to tell you something. That's wonderful, because there's so many that just kind of keep plodding along and don't recognize it, or
I can't take complete sole credit. I was willing and did it on my own, but it was suggested to me by my second wife and another close friend of ours that found me a person that she thought would be good for me to see. But I willingly went,
and that's big. I mean, that's a big step, because so many people will just at that stage say, "Nope, I'm fine. I don't need anyone. It's what it's going to be." So.
And then in addition to depression, I had other periods of very erratic behavior, which was very impulsive, and
give me an example.
You want like the raw example?
Whatever it is, because this is what a life. This is
so.
Others are going to learn from it and participate.
I would have, periods where I was resistant to. So I had these times where I was very resistant to what anybody would say. I would act impulsively, like I had quit drinking a couple times during this time, but I may just decide to go drink, and so I would just, almost without thinking, I would stop there, buy some, and drink it. I had, extramarital sexual encounters, quite a few over the years, and it seemed like these all happened when I wasn't depressed, so it was kind of on the opposite cycle. If I was depressed, I was sort of at home, being faithful and not drinking. If I was not in that phase, I was breaking the law with speeding tickets, car accidents, drinking, spending lots of money, really pretty foolishly, you know, a couple of examples. I switched vehicles. I had 4 different cars within a year
Wow.
during one of these periods. I think I'm still paying that off.
Because
today
you had
because
accidents
I
and you
was
kept
so-
buying, or just
No,
you just kept buying cars because you
I would
you
trade
could?
them.
Oh,
I would drive it for a few months and decide
Yeah.
I want something different and trade it in, and
that's
so
living the high life.
it's it felt like it. So you know, and one time I did have an accident, and instead of waiting for my car to get fixed and driving the rental, I bought another car, and then I wrecked that one.
Wow.
So, and this is all. I mean, a lot of that is really within the last 3 years. So it just got progressively out of hand.
And could you still get insurance after all those accidents?
It was really hard for me to get insurance. I did get it, but I would be
From one car to the next, you could still get insurance?
yeah, and
Wow.
I have it today, but I pay an exorbitant amount for it. I pay like $2,200 for 6 months, and I drive an old car.
Lucky you can do it though.
I couldn't do it a year ago.
But it's that part of growth, isn't it? I mean, that you're looking at and you say, you know, it really all kind of came about this year. And when
Yeah.
I first met Nick, we have a job together, and you know, there was just something that was weighing heavy on Nick, and I just said to him about 3 weeks or maybe 2 weeks ago, God, you've just got this glow, this new vibrancy about you. And you just kind of said that, you know, I've really had a year of growth.
Yeah, and this year's been amazing, and so you know,
Going backwards to the cars.
yeah, going backwards. So this kind of all finally, I left the job abruptly, impulsively, moved back to Des Moines. Struggled to get another job, got another job, got fired from that job. I was there 2 months. I got fired because I was inappropriately texting people. So in retrospect, I was still manic, and I didn't know that, and I was still spending money I didn't have. I owned 3 houses. I had, my wife and kids kind of were forced to move back to Des Moines because I left my job in Grinnell.
Yeah.
We had split up 2 or 3 different times during this, and it was just out of control.
Is there anyone out here that's felt this way that can know exactly what Nick is talking about? Because now, would you share your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I have bipolar disorder, and I have the type where I get depression and mania, and I had never been treated for it. I will say it was suggested by other people that weren't my doctors or anything, but they were health professionals that I knew because of what I do.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought about it at a few different times, but it didn't really match up, or I tried to make it so it didn't really match up. I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
Until we had enough data. So it took about 3 years to probably get to the bottom of it, and then I finally was diagnosed with bipolar and treated for it. The way previous diagnoses I had probably didn't really help my last couple years as far as my behavior either, but for a while.
Why is that?
I think the medications that I was prescribed for them
Yeah.
were sort of, could even enhance my bipolar or my mania.
Yeah. And that's that struggle, isn't it? And you're older and still have that issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we experienced that with my children when they were in puberty, and it was just the worst experience. Worst.
Yeah, and I was labeled as an adult with ADHD, so I didn't try those meds as a kid.
And was that accurate, the ADHD?
Nowadays I don't think it was. I thought it was at that time because of the questionnaire and stuff, that I had all of those things, but I think I had all those things when I was manic.
Yeah.
So I think it was hard to know, but then I was put on a stimulant. I was on a stimulant for 2 years, which turned out to be
Oh,
kind
my
of the
good
worst
Lord.
2 years of my life, even though I felt great. I felt great because I was manic and because I was on a stimulant, but yet my behavior was all over the place.
Oh.
And so
And that's when you go in and you trust the doctors. And did they do blood work for you to level that, to understand?
That one, now I do blood work regularly because of the medication I'm on. I didn't have to then because I was on one. I mean, I think I was on a good dose of it, but I was also a pretty heavy adult. So,
Yeah.
It wasn't until I screwed up bad enough where I decided to drink on a whim and went out carousing around, and I ended up driving through somebody's yard and getting arrested and brought in for an OWI. But I kind of got things straightened out, and so a week after that I went to a treatment center for 3 months, and that's where I was able to work with a psychiatrist on a daily and weekly basis, and several other mental health professionals, and we kind of traced the history of everything that had happened, and that's how they came up with bipolar, and they started me on lithium soon after that. And honestly, I that was probably right about January 1, and we're now into October. And I haven't felt it's a little bit strange. I feel great. I felt really good when I was manic too, but my behavior was out of control. So I don't feel like that ever. But as far as knowing who I am and my predictability and what I can trust about myself, I mean, within a week of taking that, it has never been the same for me ever since I was a kid.
Just feeling grounded?
Feeling grounded, feeling good about myself, and having repetitive, predictable behavior.
Right. Wow.
I don't get too amped up about anything, but I haven't spent too many days down in the dumps since then either. Maybe a few days here and there, based on everything that's happened, is depressing. But that would be a little depressing for anybody. But I seem to bounce back from those, and so it's really been a game changer for me, really, to have an accurate diagnosis.
And why do you trust that diagnosis?
I think I trust it. I think there's a couple of reasons. I might be, there are other patients like me, but I also I carry a little bit more. I'm pretty educated on mental health and these diagnoses before, and so when I look back, it really makes sense to me that that's what's going on, and I think that's probably why I trust it the most. But also I had other people looking at it and looking at the timelines I would present of this crazy stuff that happened, and they see that a lot, and they see it in professionals like myself, and so I really trusted their thought about it as well.
When you look back now, do you know other men or women that you work with that were similar in feeling?
Yeah, I can think of a couple that I know that probably have a very similar diagnosis to me. And then,
how did that affect you in surgery?
That's the
Because we
thing
take
I've
so
been
much
I've been thinking
trust.
about. I do think, ultimately it didn't affect my skill as actually getting the operation done or doing what needed to be done. I do think that it affected my judgment in that I might be pretty quick to do things
Mm-hmm.
and think, I'm pretty good and I can do that. And so I think it was, if I was manic, it would have been a lot harder for me to say no.
Yeah. Right.
Luckily for me, it didn't translate to negative outcomes, but it could have. So I think I was still, for whatever reason, I think there is sort of this ability to, and for me, it's like anybody doing their job. It's there's a repetition to it, and a thing you do every day, like riding a bike, or
There's a checklist in your head, and you just go right down.
Yeah, it just so
Yeah.
happens I have a human life, but in the, which is bigger and scarier for some people, but for the people that do it every day, it's not a lot different than plumbing or
Yeah.
or electrical work or
Yeah.
anything else. I mean, you have a task, and one body looks remarkably the same as the next.
Right.
For the most part, everything's in its right spot, and so I think there's a ability that I was able to do when I was doing that, but certainly anything outside of surgery
Mhm.
was chaotic.
And it's interesting that you just said to me, everything was in the right spot in the body. It was predictable. But I'm telling you, that brain that we have is not
Unpredictable.
predictable. And that is what stops people from being open about their experiences with mental illness. Because no two are alike. It isn't like cancers and all that. So if you were to speak to administrators about your illness and how many years you were able to go through and not have any issues come up, fortunately, what would you want to say to them? What would be the message that they need to hear?
I think it's a great question, and there are probably more things than I'll be able to come up with right here today, but I can think of a lot of this. The problem with it is that when somebody is ill and nobody really knows they're ill, or they don't have a diagnosis or they're not medicated for it, there are behaviors that take place that seem like bad behavior. I mean, they are bad. It is bad behavior. And they're kind of written off as bad behavior without finding a reason for it. There are a lot of people that get drunk and get an OWI that really are depressed or upset or pissed about something.
Yeah.
And maybe it's more depression, or maybe they're manic, or maybe it's something
Anxiety.
else. And so I think the problem is I think we act too quickly on the behavior, and we don't focus on what's going on with the person. It doesn't really excuse the behavior. I don't want to excuse my behavior. It was bad, and I probably deserved what I have gotten through all of it.
But in the overall scheme of things, hospital administrators, you work for them, per se,
Right.
and they're kind of your caretaker of making sure you've got everything you need and that you're as healthy as you can be, and etc. But they failed it because they didn't know enough, or they didn't care. They had too many things. I mean,
I think sometimes
where do they have to learn?
I think sometimes, I think you're exactly right. I think it's, sometimes they don't know enough, but sometimes it's because they don't want to know enough.
Yeah.
Because it gives them an easy way out. Because people are sometimes scared of taking on that, because it doesn't fit their normal, it's not like a broken leg or pneumonia. It's a different sort of deal when you're dealing with mental health or addiction, or both. I think that they should be more aware about how their physicians are doing with some sort of regular check-in. I will have that for a while now because all this has happened. But wouldn't it be great if we had that before, and we're able to prevent even one other doctor or other employee from anywhere
Right.
having to go through what I had to do. There would be easier ways to get this figured out than to end up starting completely over and doing a 3-month treatment, and not
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
needs that.
Did any of the hospitals or surgery centers have a quiet room or any facility that you could take a break from what you're doing and kind of go back and regroup?
So I would say, yes, there's usually a place where that could happen, but the pace at which the day goes typically doesn't allow for that. And I think, we're pretty driven on how many cases get done. Surgery's an engine that feeds the hospital. It's, surgery, radiology, and laboratory are usually the 3 money makers. And so, the more cases, the better it is. And so we're kind of driven that way. And me going back, I have to be driven a different way. It's not how many cases can I do in a day. It's how many days can I continue to do this job, which means for me, I have to do less cases.
Yeah.
And
do you have that opportunity to be able to
I think I will have to
have that schedule, or do you have to negotiate?
I think I'll have to explain to them why I need that, but I think that's probably going to come up for me anyway. I guess my advice to people that aren't starting over per se like I am, but is that they need to try to build that in, and they need to figure out how they can do it for the longevity and not how they can do it for the short term. In retrospect, I was doing it for the short term. The pace I was going was not sustainable. Probably even if my mental health would have been, quote, normal.
Yeah. But as a caretaker of children, and caretaker crosses so many lines, as a caretaker of children, my babies, I didn't have the wherewithal to know that I should say to my daughter at 3, do you have people talking to you in your head? And she didn't know to say that to me and say, Mom, did so-and-so come and talk to you like they talked to me? It's just such a huge learning curve that you're coming and chatting honestly and opening up with me and giving this to others. It gives a reinforcement to say that we can be perfectly normal, capable, fulfilling careers, have them, and still have a issue that we aren't defined by, and that's mental illness.
Yes.
That's big.
That is, and that's.
And I think that you can give that to others who haven't come to be aware and go to an employer or have been asked to leave, and people have tolerated the behaviors, or they've been fired again and again and again. You know what? Slow down.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to get help.
Yep. There was
That's a big
nothing
one.
about help that was ever, any help that I ever got along the way was not scary or threatening.
Yeah.
The scary part is for most of us is usually just internal, in that we're admitting that maybe that we can't do it on our own. And and for a surgeon that's really tough, and that's tough for other people in other professions too, because we want to be able to do that. And I have.
And look how much you've accomplished on your own.
I did, and then I've also, I've accomplished a lot of great things in this past year, and a lot of it's from asking for help.
Well, share some of that with us.
So,
or with us.
I spent numerous months without a driver's license for one reason or another.
I'd see you pedaling to work.
One reason for the OWI, but I even extended it longer because I had all of these cars still registered under my name, and anyway, it was too complicated, and so to get down to one, and so I just kept not having it for a longer time. And so I have, since March, up until last week, have gotten anywhere that I needed to go besides work and home. I've needed a ride from somebody, and so I've relied on lots of people, family members, friends, people that aren't even friends, and
That's pretty humbling.
I even Ubered. One day I Ubered to, I had 3 stops to make. I had the grocery shop, and there's 2 other stores I wanted to go to, and so I did a circle Uber and got to all of them, and the guy brought me back. So it was quite an experience. I ended up playing golf with that Uber driver later on.
Oh, what a kick!
Because we kind of hit it off, and one of my stops was going to the golf store. So
that brought up a conversation usually.
Yeah, I had to explain why I needed to go to all these places, which was a good story. That would be one instance. You know, even which, you know, that's one thing for myself. But I have 3 kids, and so you know, I couldn't take them to or fro either because I didn't have wheels. So.
And did they understand that?
Yeah, they did. You know.
Did they know the full story?
They know that my oldest 2 know that Dad. They all 3 knew that Dad didn't have a driver's license. The oldest 2, which are 8 and 12, know.
Boys or girls?
2 girls that Daddy was drinking.
Yeah.
And doesn't drink anymore, and lost his license. I don't think they know kind of the whole story about spending a night in jail or things like that. I feel like I have to be. I don't want to lie to them, but I also don't want to scare them or tell them stuff they don't need to know.
And
so
in time,
we've been pretty good, I think, about making it. I don't hide it from them. I mean, they know. Gosh, why can't you drive, Dad? I mean, they're more blatant than a lot of adults when it comes to that. So, so we, you know, I was home with the younger 2 during the quarantine last spring, and so that worked out good. I was able to homeschool them and things like that, but I couldn't. You know, we couldn't just run somewhere and go get something, and we haven't been able to until last week. So it's I got to say, the simple pleasure of, you know, just having your freedom back. About if you want to go to Target or you want to go to Walmart, you can just go.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Oh, I can't even. You know, I can't even imagine because we take it for granted.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And I certainly did.
Now looking at your children and being a father of 4, how does what you've experienced relate to them, and you're wanting to be more aware, or are you more aware of their behaviors and not wanting to overthink it?
Yeah, I worry about them all the time. I worry about them more now than I did before. I think that's because I think about them more. I was caught up in my own stuff so much before that I didn't even give them, you know, I feel bad about that I wasn't thinking about them even more than what I did. Now, I worry about a few things. I worry about anything genetic that I'm going to pass on, which certainly is alcoholism, and bipolar potentially. And so that one's a little tougher because you don't pick up on that until a little bit later on.
And they say that usually hits it in their 20s, doesn't it? The
Right.
bipolar. Yeah, it isn't like schizophrenia that can come on at an early age. Because Caroline experienced that at age 3. She saw her first demons and heard them.
I forgot to mention one other thing that also allows me to worry, and I kind of left it out when we talked about my progression through life. But my younger brother committed suicide.
Oh.
When I was, he was 27, I was 31, and which, you know, it was impactful on my life, certainly, and my parents. But it just kind of, you know, there was some depression before, there was some alcoholism before, then you get down to myself and my siblings, and you see some alcoholism and depression.
Right.
He didn't have any children, but you know, I worry about my children, and with those 2 specifically. I can see a little bit of that in my oldest daughter. She gets depressed.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So I do worry about, you know, depression with my kids, and particularly my oldest one seems to be a little bit more, tends to be that way, and so I'm kind of watching that. But she works with, she sees a therapist on a regular basis. And,
Boy, that's a good thing.
that's something that when I think about it, I probably would have benefited from that as a child.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we had really the means to do that financially back then, but now I'm certainly glad that her mother and I can do that for her. I think she looks forward to going. She knows it's somebody safe she can talk to.
Right.
And I think that's a great resource for kids, even if you think they're struggling with just the most simple thing. Sometimes it's a lot deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's amazing what the children came up with. My children, when they look back and we reflect on our years in mental illness, I'm telling you, there isn't much that we didn't see in self-harm, 5 suicide attempts. It's just, there isn't much that we haven't lived through. And, but the girls are just so right on about certain feelings and emotions that went on at that time that just kind of blew by me because I just had so much going on trying to hold it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can think of, just in how I felt, and I turned out. I was pretty successful, but I still didn't really feel that great about myself.
Yeah.
My younger brother committed suicide, didn't really feel that great about himself on the inside. My daughter with depression, part of that is she doesn't have her own identity or doesn't feel that great about herself sometimes. And so, what an advantage to try to get a handle of that, on that as soon as possible.
And time's on her side because she has that, and she'll know by the time she gets older how to manage. And there's no predictability in saying that it will all go swell, but life isn't that way.
Right.
But at least she'll have the tools early on.
Yeah, and she gets things to try from her therapist, and I know that she does.
Yeah.
Try them, and
Cool.
we have seen positive results from her going, and she's probably been going maybe 4 years now.
And I think that's the hard part. And one of the things that affects me about wanting to help rurally is that they don't have all that access. And I, as a coach, have worked with individuals sending their kids to school and relationships and mothers specifically about how do you handle it all and how do you keep it together and without wigging out and turning to drugs and liquor and all of it. So
yeah, exactly. And they're as exposed or more exposed than what even we were. Some of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that interests me is you're now going to go back to work.
Yep, here soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Probably December, January.
That's exciting.
Yeah. I have to search for a job now,
And are there groups or agencies that can help you do that?
yeah, and I'll probably use both. I've had luck in the past doing it on my own. Also, there's recruiters and things that will help.
Uh-huh.
And I'll have a little bit of a story to tell of why. But I think
But with
somebody,
pride.
but with pride.
Yeah, no kidding.
And honesty.
Yeah.
And I think that I think really they're getting the best of me now than I ever have been, really, because I've kind of got a lot more stuff to offer other than just surgery now. And my life feels a bit more complete.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have to be. It's important for me to, number one, go back to doing what I do, but number two, stay with what has been working for me so well this year. And I know that'll be a little harder in doing that, but I think there's a way to balance. Everybody always told me, work-life balance, work-life balance. That's all they ever said.
Yeah.
I failed at that miserably.
Yeah. It's hard. That's a.
But it has become a necessity for me, particularly. I have the history to show what it's like if I don't stay in check.
Yeah.
So So it's important for me to find something where I don't have to just completely work my butt off,
Yep.
but I can still be a hard worker, but still get some time off. So somebody's gotta want that. So.
And it's nice, but isn't it refreshing that you have the clarity now to say, you know what, I need that and I want it.
Before I would,
And now it's another thing for asking because you can ask
yeah, I
before
can just
instead
ask
of just
for it. And
driving forward.
before it would have I'd just taken it on, and I wouldn't say no
Yeah.
to anything really. And you kind of get taken advantage of doing that. And you get overworked, and quite honestly, I can't handle all of that. So I need to keep it to really just the job, and not a bunch of other committees and board member type stuff and all this other stuff that can sometimes go along with it, at least for a while.
Right. Well, I can't tell you how proud of you I am in being your friend and being able to have this discussion together and be comfortable doing it. I really, really value that. And I would love to have you come back because going forward, I'm speaking to nurses and I'm speaking to psychiatrists and I'm speaking to mothers and I'm speaking to fathers in the situations of being a caretaker, sending children to school, how do I manage a baby on my lap, trying to do my work in this virus situation. And I think that we can really get some good things out in front of us. And also I'd like to hear back from you. I'd like to have, if you have any questions for Nick, you know what, would you be open to receiving them through?
Absolutely.
mentalillnessiowa.com or go to mentalillnessiowa@gmail.com because I think this is the way we're going to start this rapport. And if you go there and you like this opportunity of Nick and I speaking, I'd love to have you like the page and tell us that you'd like to see more and if you'd like to participate, I'm right there with you. So thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
It's
I
great.
also appreciate what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you.